Good morning, everyone. To follow on from previous briefings, I want to honour my commitment to ensure that I continue to keep you updated on the investigation and the process to date. Specifically today, I want to talk about the process to reunite the victims with their loved ones. This is, for us, an absolute priority for family reasons, for compassionate reasons, and for cultural reasons. That's progressing very well. It was our intention to do what we could to complete that by today. We are making very good progress. As of last night, at 11:30 p.m, 21 of those victims had been formally identified and were being made available to release to their loved ones. By midday, there will be a further, we believe, 6 victims identified and available to their families. By the end of today, by the end of Wednesday, we should have completed the majority of those identifications. But I have to say that some of those victims will take a little longer. I want to assure people about how much we're doing in this area. We have over 120 people involved in this process. So from the mortuary process to the reconciliation process, the identification, and then presenting to coroners. We have the country's best pathologists. We have a large police team. We have a large number of forensic experts. We have international experts as part of that 120 strong team whose absolute focus is reuniting these victims with their loved ones. We also have 21 family liaison officers who are meeting and have met with every one of those families. They're there to ensure those people get all the information they need. Now that team is being led by Inspector Wendy Robilliard and Inspector Mark Harrison, who tragically have a lot of experience in this domain. We also have Deputy Commissioner Homaha, who's working very closely with communities to ensure that they, at the highest levels, are getting all of the information that we can provide. As police, I've said our number one priority is the victims and their families, but we do, of course, have other obligations. And the first one, on behalf of the Chief Coroner and all of the coroners, is to ensure absolute accuracy in that identification process. It must be to the standard required for a coroner, part of our process, and we have 6 coroners, including the Chief Coroner, on site right here to enable that to occur, working with our reconciliation team. That standard of identification must be to evidential standards, and that occurs here. So there is a hearing for every one of those victims taking place very close to where you are now. And of course, if we get that wrong, that is unforgivable. So we're focused on getting that right. Absolutely. As you all know, the other responsibility of the police is the prosecution of this person. And part of the process I'm talking about is not just delivering to the coroner an evidential standard for identification. We must prove for prosecution the cause of death to the satisfaction of the coroner to the judge. You cannot convict for murder without that cause of death. So again, this is a very comprehensive process that must be completed to the highest standard. That's what's going on here today. Of course, we would like to do that as quickly as possible, but it must be done as professionally and accurately as possible. To get it wrong is unforgivable, and you cannot come back from that. I've got one or two more things to say, and then I'll do everything I can to answer your questions. The second point I just want to give some clarity to is the timeline for our response, which I believe was fantastic. We gave some general details. I want to give more specific details. I can tell you that within 5 minutes and 39 seconds, our first responders, armed, on the scene, ready to respond. Within 10 minutes, our armed offenders squad were on scene, ready to respond. And within 21 minutes, the person that is now in custody was arrested. 21 minutes from when we were first notified to when that person was intervened and arrested and away from further harm from the public. I've said before, we strongly believe we stopped him on the way to a further attack. So lives were saved by our staff, courageous in their intervention. That's all I have at the moment. I'm happy to try and answer your questions.
Commissioner, could you just go through the numbers of victims that have been identified and ready for release again? Yes, 11:30 last night.
Yes, as of 11:30 last night, 21 people, 21 of these victims were formally identified. A coroner's hearing had been held here, and they are ready to be reunited with families. Some already have. Those hearings are commencing right now as we gather, and I anticipate there will be another 6 completed by midday, and that process will then carry on until the very long hours of this evening. So there will be more. So the majority, we hope, will be completed by the end of today, Wednesday.
When do you expect all bodies to have been released by?
Some will be more difficult. So all I can say at the moment, I don't want to set false expectations, is that the majority will be completed by tonight, but some will take a little longer.
And why is that, Commissioner? Why are some more difficult?
To reach the evidential threshold for the coroner, to get some of the, what we describe as the ante-mortem data to compare to the post-mortem data. Sorry, I'm being a little technical, but this is how it works. To get sufficient information that we can present to a coroner to an evidential standard to prove the identity of that person.
Commissioner, I'm from the Wall Street Journal. I just wanted to ask, a few days into the investigation now, can you give us an idea of your priorities in the international investigation? What sort of cooperation are you looking for and have received internationally? Are you getting any clearer picture of the gunman's movements overseas, path to radicalisation, that sort of thing from your international contacts?
Yes, and I have to be careful about what I say because we have prosecuted this person. Charges are laid. So as much as I want to answer your question as fully as possible, I have to be careful about what I put into the domain now that a prosecution has been commenced. But I can assure you this is an absolute international investigation. So the sharp end is here in Canterbury. We have stood up a very big investigation and intelligence unit in Wellington. So that involves the New Zealand Police, our intelligence partners, and partners from all around the world. So we have the FBI on the ground here and in Wellington. We have the Australian Federal Police, the New South Wales Police, other Australian jurisdictions, but we're also working very closely with other countries, our other Five Eyes partners, in terms of cooperation around the profiles, the travel, etc., to build a comprehensive picture of this person that we will put before the court. I myself spoke to the director of the FBI several days ago, who has, as we do in these occasions, offered every support. But that support, what it looks like on the ground, is a lot of their expertise is now here helping with that investigation, and they're doing what they can right around the world.
So that's the role of the FBI. So if the Federal Bureau of Investigation officers are here in Christchurch, for what, on loan essentially, because what's the
Yeah, they travelled here, principally in Wellington, to assist in the investigation around profiling, but of course they have expertise, tragically, on these types of investigations, so they're lending their expertise to the New Zealanders. So we have the responsibility to head the investigation, but we get support internationally for that.
Just on the alleged attacker, can you clarify how many guns he had on him and how many were actually used?
Look, what we've put in the domain is that, and again I've got to be a little careful how I couch this because the matter's now within the courts, but what we put in the public domain is the fact that 2 assault rifles, shotguns and perhaps 1 other firearm
were used in the attack, or he had on him in total?
That I'm not going to say what we believe was used in the attack because that's the evidence we'll put before the court, but what we can say is what we seized, and they were assault rifles and at least 1 semi-automatic shotgun.
And were any purchased from Gun City?
I'm not going to talk about that at this point.
When you say that that police officers stopped him on the way to potentially another attack, have you identified somewhere that you think that he was going?
Yes, but I'm not going to go into those details. I don't wish to traumatise others, so that will form part of the court case. But we absolutely believe we know where he was going, and we intervened on the way.
And was it somewhere where there were a lot of people?
I can't answer that question.
Was it another mosque? Was it another?
I can't go into that detail.
Had he travelled to Christchurch before the trip he's made to commit this attack?
Again, this will all form part of the case. We do have that information, but what I don't want to do is give out information that may later prejudice a very, very serious prosecution for murder.
Commissioner,
And
did you investigate that place that you believe he intended to go to? Have you been to that address or been to that location to check whether there were any devices laid there ahead of it?
No doubt that did form part of one of the phases. That was done right across Canterbury, actually.
Commissioner, do you believe that an apology is needed for the families who have had delays in getting their loved ones back? Families who say that police have lied to them and said that they'd get them back sooner than they are. Do you think there's an apology needed from you to those families for the delays?
The reason I'm here is to get the information to the public, to the families. We've got really good liaison officers who are sharing all the information possible. I absolutely understand the grief and some of the anger that may come. It's absolutely natural. But we have an obligation on behalf of them and all New Zealanders to get this right. We are professionals, so we have to get the identifications absolutely correct. We have to prove cause of death. We've got all the expertise and resource required. We're doing it as quickly as possible, but in a way that ensures we don't make mistakes.
Thank you, everybody.
There is an entire room of journalists.
Can you rule out?
You talked about identification being difficult for some of the victims. Is the video being used in that identification process at all?
So there's forensic being used in terms of the identification. There's also circumstantial evidence being used as part of that as secondary means to identify these people. As you can imagine, there's overwhelming information that we need to put together. That's one of the reasons why this takes a little time. I'm happy to answer more questions.
Can you give us an update on the Kiwi Farms website?
Sorry, there's some who haven't had an opportunity yet.
Around the room, please. Thank you. Sorry, you go.
Can you please give us an update on the Kiwi Farms website? Can you confirm that they refused to hand over information, and have you progressed on that conversation with them?
Look, that is part of the investigation. I am aware of what's occurred, but no, I can't go into it at this point.
Commissioner, how are your officers coping? The people who were there that day, what trauma support are they needing being offered?
Of course, one of my priorities as the Commissioner of Police is to make sure that our officers involved, especially as first responders, who did an outstanding job. I went to the scene myself last night to get some idea of what they would have confronted. They absolutely need our support. They're getting all the support they need. But not just them, everyone involved in this gets affected by the grief and the sorrow and the horror of this event. So we're making sure they get all that support. We have psychologists, psychiatrists, a huge welfare team behind us and the other emergency services. You know, you please remember what St John's Ambulance and others, people at the hospital, have had to go through. So you're right to ask. They absolutely deserve the best support.
And just to check, as a British reporter, you talked about international experts, forensics, pathology, you talked about the FBI. Do I need to know about any British involvement?
We're definitely talking with our counterparts over there. They're doing their bit. I don't know of... we have an intelligence phase of this, so that part's not for me to talk to, obviously.
Commissioner,
I just want to share this around a little bit.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner, why are helicopters flying sorties at night?
That's all around reassurance. So I am aware that some people, it affects people in different ways, but I can say it's to give real public assurance that the police are here.
Early hours of the morning, there's no assurance there if people are sleeping. What's the reason why helicopters are flying around at night, sir?
It's purely for that reason. But if it's affecting people in a negative way, I'm very conscious of that, and we'll look at that.
Can you deny there is an ongoing threat?
Right now, the current threat level for New Zealand is at high. So we're taking absolute precautions. It's about that. If there was a specific threat, we'd make sure we communicate.
Have you recovered all remnants of explosives from the gunman?
We believe so, but again, that's an evidential part of the investigation. I'd prefer not to go into.
Can you clarify about
I do want to share this around.
Can you just clarify about the response after the initial response, which was very fast? There are some questions about how many first responders, especially emergency personnel, working on the wounded were there. Can you clarify the scale of the secondary response? How many people were there? You know, where did they come from? Ambulances? Anything?
I can confirm it was considerable. Every available resource was deployed. Can't give you absolute numbers, but I'm sure they will be available at some point.
Commissioner,
on the ongoing threat issue, could I just ask, there's been a lot of Twitter traffic around the world about this being the start of a war. How concerned are you at this stage about that traffic, about the possibility of follow-up attacks, copycat attacks, that sort of thing?
Look, that's always a consideration. We've learnt internationally that should be our focus. I've talked about what the New Zealand Police and our partner agencies will do, especially over the next 4 to 6 weeks. It is about being absolutely vigilant, absolutely visible, absolutely ready to respond to anything. You know, there's been 1 or 2 emergency scares around airports and bags left. We'll be there immediately. We've asked the public, see something, say something, call us. You can never get that wrong. So please, any information that's out there, if anything worries you, we're there for you.
Commissioner, could you just explain the identification process a little more fully? Because I understand that effectively none of the families, perhaps bar one, have been involved in any visual identification process. Why have you been reluctant to use the families to try and identify victims, and then how are you establishing their identity?
Yeah, sure, that's a very important point. So it's a very comprehensive process. So I've been working, so I spent yesterday evening, stepping myself right through that process, even though I have some experience in that. I just wanted to be assured that we were doing everything we possibly could. So the process actually commenced for one of the very first times at the scenes of this crime. We then have a very comprehensive and well-practiced process of going through the identification so that we can present evidence to coroners who make the final decision. Your point around visual is that forms part of what we call secondary evidence. So we are doing that as part of this process, but the primary evidence we need for identifications is around fingerprints, DNA, and odontology. That's the top bar, but we use circumstantial and visual as part of that process.
But have you been using visual? Because I understand families haven't been able to come in and say, that is my father, that is my son, or anything like that.
No, we have been, and I was at the mortuary when one was being prepared yesterday, and that was completed.
Commissioner, some comments from the Turkish president campaigning on the Gallipoli Peninsula today, threatening retribution for what has happened here in the context of a political rally, specific retribution against the gunman here. Does that concern you? How helpful is that those comments are being made by a head of state? And is there any extra protection offered for the gunman?
Look, the first thing I'll say to that is that our focus here in the New Zealand Police is the safety of all New Zealanders. We are taking care to be alert to all kinds of conversations, and that will inform our deployment. The points you raised, some of them are not for me to comment on, but needless to say, we're aware of the context and the environment and international precedents in terms of what can occur following such tragic and horrific events, and that's what we're deploying to.
Can you rule out accomplices? Can you rule out that someone helped this person?
What I can say at the moment, most positively, is there was only one attacker. The investigation focus is to work out whether anyone else was involved in supporting or in any other way, and we're still conducting that part of the investigation.
Could there, for instance, be someone who went and scoped out the scene of attack? Are you potentially looking for someone who went and scoped out the scene of attack?
We're looking at all of that, but we don't have a specific person or persons that we're currently looking at in that context. But we're keeping a very open mind.
There could well be these people out there in New Zealand that helped this guy.
I'm just saying we are looking at no one specifically, but it's still a major part of our investigation. More to eliminate what you're asking about.
Do you have enough evidence now to lay more charges against the accused?
That's the process at the moment. So the next appearance is in the High Court on the 5th of April. There will undoubtedly be more charges. We're working towards, as you can imagine, a considerable number of the most serious charges.
What happened to the other 3 people who were arrested on the day? Where are they now? What were they arrested for? How did they fit into the overall picture?
Okay, can I have this as the last question, please?
Oh, I was just going to say
one more.
We do.
Yeah,
So we have a couple. Just a
so
couple more.
in terms of that, I
patient.
think I've been quite clear. So there was a lone gentleman who appeared at one of the cordons. He wasn't involved. He did have a firearm, so that's being dealt with. There was another couple who turned up at a cordon, a male and a female. She has been released without charge. I do understand that the male in that vehicle has been charged with firearm offences. We do not believe they were in any way related to the attacker or the attack. So one more over here, thank
Have
you.
you worked out yet what the gunman got up to in between checking out of his Dunedin flat and last Friday?
I'm not quite sure what you mean in terms of checking out of his
Well, I
flat.
thought he'd moved out, hadn't he? Of his flat down there?
No, not to my knowledge.
No. So have you established his movements anyway before the shooting?
That's all part of the inquiry. So thank you very much.
The
I will.
clerical thing, the discrepancy between the 36 minutes reported a couple of days ago and the 21 minutes today. Why the discrepancy?
No, that's a fair question. I think the 36 related to when we had him back here safely in custody. But when he was in, or under arrest of those 2 very brave officers, was about 21 minutes. Thank you very much for everything. We'll continue to keep you updated as regularly as possible.
10 more questions?
Thank you.
Commissioner, just in
Thank you.
Australian inquiries, because they've been diverted back to you,